The school bell rang and the noise began again. Children rushed into the small classroom, carrying their bags and chatter with them. The teacher, tired but patient, stood near the blackboard waiting for the chaos to settle. It never really did. The walls were cracked, and the ceiling fan above made a soft rattling sound that blended with laughter, whispers, and the shuffle of feet. In the corner of the room sat a boy named Arjun. His shirt was neatly washed but faded, and his shoes had lost their shine long ago. He sat quietly, watching others talk and joke around. His notebook was open, the handwriting inside neat and small. He wasn't the kind of student who raised his hand often. He rarely spoke unless someone asked him directly. For most of the other students, school was a place of fun and play. But for Arjun, it was a place of calm. Outside school, life was much heavier. His father worked as a cart puller, starting before sunrise and ending long after sunset. His mother stayed at home, often unwell, trying to manage the house with what little they had. Arjun knew their struggles, though they never complained. Every day he promised himself he would study harder, so that one day his father wouldn't have to pull that cart anymore. But in school, no one knew much about him. To the other children, he was just the quiet boy who rarely joined in their games. Some thought he was shy. Some thought he was boring. A few even teased him for his old shoes or his silence. He never said anything back. He would just smile softly and look down at his notebook. That afternoon, the classroom was noisier than usual. The teacher had decided to have an open discussion instead of the regular lesson. She wanted her students to talk about their dreams, what they wanted to become in the future. It was supposed to be a lighthearted session, something that would make the children imagine their best selves. She smiled warmly and said, "All right, everyone, today we're going to talk about your dreams. Who wants to start?" Dozens of hands shot up. The energy in the room was bright. One boy shouted that he wanted to be a doctor. Another said an engineer. A girl stood proudly and said she wanted to be a pilot. The class clapped and cheered after every answer. Even the teacher laughed at some of the funny or unexpected dreams. One student said he wanted to be a magician who could make homework disappear. As the round went on, Arjun quietly listened. His eyes followed each classmate as they spoke with excitement. He loved hearing their dreams, and they sounded so big, so far away, like stars in the sky. But deep inside, he also knew his dream was different. It wasn't about fame or money. It wasn't about himself at all. When the teacher called out his name, the laughter faded just a little. Arjun looked up, surprised. He hadn't expected his turn to come so soon. A few students turned their heads, curious about what he would say. Someone whispered, "He probably doesn't have a dream." Another giggled. The teacher noticed the whispers and gave them a small look that said, "Quiet." Then she smiled kindly at Arjun and said, "Your turn, Arjun. What do you want to become when you grow up?" Arjun hesitated. His fingers touched the edge of his notebook. His mind was full, but his throat felt dry. For a few seconds, no sound came out. The teacher waited patiently. Finally, in a soft voice, he said, "I'm not sure what I want to become." A few giggles escaped from the back row. The teacher raised her hand to quiet them. She said gently, "That's okay. Take your time. You can tell us anything, what you like, what you hope for, even something small." Arjun looked around. Everyone's eyes were on him now. His heart beat faster. But then he remembered his father's tired face that morning, the way his hands shook as he tied the ropes around the cart, the way he smiled and said, "Don't worry about me. Just study." Arjun took a breath and said, "I don't know what I want to be yet, but I want to do something so that my father can rest. He works very hard. Every day he pulls heavy loads, and at night his back hurts a lot. I just want to grow up and help him so he doesn't have to do that anymore." The words came out softly, almost like a whisper. But the silence that followed was loud. The children who had been laughing just seconds before went still. The air in the classroom felt heavier, as if everyone had forgotten how to speak. The teacher's smile faded into something gentler, a look of quiet understanding. She didn't say anything for a moment. She just looked at Arjun, her eyes filled with emotion she couldn't hide. Arjun lowered his head, unsure if he had said something wrong. He didn't like attention. He only spoke the truth. But now the entire class was looking at him differently. Before the teacher could respond, the bell rang. The sound startled everyone, breaking the silence like a glass shattering. The students slowly packed their bags, still unusually quiet. A few glanced at Arjun as they left the room, their earlier excitement replaced by thoughtfulness. Arjun stayed seated for a while, pretending to organize his books. The teacher walked over to him and said softly, "That was very brave of you to share, Arjun." He nodded without meeting her eyes. He didn't feel brave. He just spoke what was in his heart. When he finally left the classroom, the corridor felt brighter, the noise of other students echoing faintly. He walked home on the narrow road lined with dusty trees, his bag bouncing lightly on his shoulder. The sun was still high and he could already see his father's cart in the distance. His father was unloading sacks of grain, his shirt soaked in sweat. Arjun hurried forward and called out, "Let me help." His father turned and smiled, tired but warm. No, you've been in school all day. Go home, wash up. I'll finish this." But Arjun didn't listen. He walked up and started lifting one of the lighter sacks. His father laughed softly, shaking his head. "You never listen, do you?" Arjun smiled and said, "I just want to help." For a moment the world around them was quiet, only the sound of birds in the distance and the creak of the old cart. His father looked at him with pride, but there was also a hint of sadness in his eyes, a kind of guilt that comes from love, from knowing how much his child sees and understands. As they walked home together that evening, neither of them spoke much. The road was long and uneven, but Arjun didn't mind. He liked walking beside his father, matching his steps, listening to the rhythm of his tired breathing. When they reached home, his mother was sitting near the doorway, shelling peas in a small metal bowl. She smiled when she saw them and said, "You're late again." His father sighed. "Work took longer today, but we're home now." Arjun sat beside his mother, helping her with the peas. She asked about school, and he told her about the class discussion. When he mentioned what he said, she paused for a second and looked at him quietly. Then she placed her hand on his head and said, "You shouldn't worry so much, my son. You just study well. That will help your father more than anything." Arjun nodded, but deep inside he still felt that strong wish, the same one that made him speak earlier that day. He didn't know how, but one day he wanted to change everything for them. That night, as he lay on the floor beside his parents, he stared at the cracked ceiling. Outside, the sound of crickets filled the dark air. He could hear his father's slow breathing, heavy and uneven. He thought about the classroom again, the laughter, the silence, and the faces that had turned toward him. For the first time, he realized that sometimes the smallest words could hold the biggest meaning. He closed his eyes, tired but peaceful. The moonlight fell through the window, resting on his face. Tomorrow would be another day, another morning of early work for his father, another long day of school for him. But now at least he had spoken his truth. And though no one said it aloud, the silence that followed those words had changed something, not just in that classroom, but in the hearts of everyone who heard them. The next morning, the classroom felt a little different. The same sunlight streamed through the dusty windows and the same chatter filled the air, but there was something quieter beneath it. A few students glanced at Arjun as he entered, but they quickly looked away. Nobody teased him that day. Nobody laughed at his worn-out bag or the patch on his sleeve. They didn't say much at all. Arjun didn't really notice. He sat in his usual seat, opened his notebook, and began copying the day's lesson from the blackboard. For him, life hadn't changed. He had spoken what he felt, and now it was over. But for everyone else, his words still echoed in the back of their minds. During break time, while most of the students ran to the playground, a few stayed behind. They whispered quietly, talking about what Arjun had said the day before. One of them, a boy who used to tease him often, said softly, "I didn't know his father worked like that. My dad has a shop. He's home every evening. I never thought someone my age could feel that way." The others nodded. The laughter that usually filled the breaks had turned into a thoughtful silence. Even the teacher noticed the change. She watched her class with a faint smile, a smile that said she was proud but also moved. Sometimes lessons didn't come from books. Sometimes they came from a single honest voice. When classes ended, the teacher asked Arjun to stay for a moment. The other students filed out, their shoes tapping softly against the concrete floor. Arjun stood by her desk, unsure if he had done something wrong. She looked at him kindly and said, "What you said yesterday was very brave. You spoke from your heart. Not many people can do that." Arjun didn't know what to say. He shifted his feet and nodded slightly. The teacher continued, "You reminded everyone that dreams don't always have to be about ourselves. Sometimes they're about the people we love." He looked up at her, surprised by how gently she said it. She handed him a small chocolate bar from her drawer, something teachers often gave as small rewards. "Here," she said. "You earned this. Not for your marks, but for your honesty." Arjun smiled, a shy and genuine smile. He took the chocolate, said thank you, and walked home that day with a lighter step. At home, his father was sitting outside, rubbing his knees. The evening air was cool, and the faint smell of cooked rice drifted from nearby houses. Arjun sat beside him, quietly unwrapping the chocolate. He broke it in half and handed one piece to his father. His father laughed. "Why are you giving this to me?" "It's yours," Arjun shrugged. "It tastes better when we share." His father looked at him for a long moment before taking the piece. They ate in silence, watching the sky slowly turn orange. Later that week, the teacher called a meeting with the headmaster. She wanted to discuss something that had been on her mind since that day. "We have so many students like Arjun," she said. "Quiet, hard-working, carrying stories we don't see. Maybe we should start something. A small fund to help children like him with books or uniforms." The headmaster listened, thoughtful. "That's a good idea," he said. "We can speak to the parents' committee and see what we can arrange." It took a few days, but soon a small program was formed. It wasn't official or fancy, just a few teachers and parents contributing what they could. They didn't tell Arjun about it. They didn't want him to feel different. They just made sure that next month his school fees were quietly covered. Arjun didn't know who helped him, but when he learned that his father didn't have to pay that month, he was overjoyed. "Maybe someone made a mistake," his father said, frowning. "We should ask." But Arjun shook his head. "Maybe it's a blessing. Let's just be thankful." His father smiled and said, "You're starting to sound wiser than me." At school, things began to change for Arjun. His classmates started including him more, asking him to play, sitting beside him during lunch. At first he was shy and unsure how to respond, but slowly he began to open up. He laughed more. He even helped others with their lessons, something he was quietly good at. One afternoon during art class, the teacher asked everyone to draw their dream. Most students drew colorful pictures. A doctor with a stethoscope, a pilot flying a plane, a singer on stage. Arjun sat quietly for a long time before he started drawing. His picture was simple, a man sleeping peacefully on a bed while a boy sat beside him reading a book. When the teacher walked by and saw it, she stopped. "This is beautiful, Arjun," she said softly. "Who is this man?" He smiled and said, "My father." The teacher felt a lump in her throat. She didn't say much, but that picture stayed in her heart long after class ended. At home, life was still hard. There were days when there wasn't enough food, and nights when his father came home so tired he could barely stand. But Arjun noticed something. His father seemed a little happier lately. Maybe it was because Arjun was doing well in school, or maybe because of the way he talked about hope now. Sometimes his father would say, "You know, when I see you study, I forget how tired I am. It makes me feel like everything will be okay." And Arjun would reply quietly, "It will be, Baba. One day you'll rest." One evening, a small event was held at the school. It was a dream-sharing day, inspired by that same discussion that had changed everything. Parents were invited, and students went on stage to talk about their dreams. Arjun didn't want to speak at first, but the teacher encouraged him gently. When his turn came, he stood on the small stage looking out at the crowd. The lights were bright and he could see his father sitting in the back, his clothes dusty from work, his eyes full of pride. Arjun took a deep breath. His voice trembled at first, but soon grew steady. He spoke about how dreams could be simple, like wanting someone you love to smile again or to rest after years of hard work. He said that sometimes the biggest dreams aren't about becoming something great, but about giving peace to someone who deserves it. When he finished, there was silence. Then slowly the audience began to clap, not the loud, playful kind, but the soft, sincere kind that comes from the heart. His father wiped his eyes quietly, pretending to hide it. That night, as they walked home together, his father said, "You made me proud today. Arjun smiled. I just said what I feel. His father placed a hand on his shoulder and said, That's what makes it special. You don't speak much, but when you do, people listen. The stars were bright above them as they walked the long road home. Arjun looked up and whispered softly, One day, Baba, I'll make everything better. His father didn't reply, but he squeezed his son's shoulder gently. And that small gesture said everything. Love, hope, and faith all wrapped into one quiet moment. That night, Arjun wrote something in his notebook before going to bed. It wasn't homework or notes. It was just one line. Dreams can be small, but hearts can be big. He didn't know it then, but those words would stay with him for years. A few days later, the school returned to its usual rhythm. The noise, the laughter, the rush of morning classes, everything looked the same on the surface. But for many students, something inside had shifted. They had begun to notice small things they used to ignore. The tired eyes of the janitor who cleaned their classroom, the vendor outside who stood under the sun all day, and even the quietness in some of their classmates' lives. For Arjun, the days passed quietly. He didn't speak much about what had happened. He didn't even realize that his small moment of honesty had touched so many people. He was just living his routine, waking early, helping his mother, studying hard, and running to school before the bell rang. One afternoon, as the students were returning from lunch, the teacher walked in carrying a few books. She smiled at the class and said, Before we start today's lesson, I want to share something. Everyone turned to listen. She looked around the room, her eyes soft. Do you all remember our discussion about dreams? A few nodded and some murmured yes. Since that day, I've been thinking a lot, she continued. Sometimes we talk about big dreams, things that make us rich or famous. But we forget that small dreams, the ones that come from love and kindness, are the ones that truly matter. Her words made the room quiet again, the same kind of silence that had followed Arjun's voice days before. She smiled faintly. One of your classmates reminded me of that lesson, without even trying to. Arjun looked down at his desk, his heart beating faster. He could feel everyone's eyes turn toward him again. But this time there was no teasing, only warmth. The teacher went on, I want all of you to write something today. Not about what you want to become, but about who you want to be. There's a difference. What you become is a job. Who you are is what makes the world better. The students bent over their papers, writing quietly. Some wrote about wanting to be kind. Others wrote about being helpful or brave. Arjun thought for a long time before writing just one line. I want to be someone who never forgets where he came from. After class, the teacher collected the papers and read them later that evening. When she came across Arjun's, she smiled and kept it aside. She wanted to show it to the headmaster, not because it was perfect, but because it was true. The next week, something special happened. The school received a small donation from a local business owner who often helped rural schools. The teachers decided to use part of the money to support students who needed help with books and supplies. When the teacher told Arjun that he would be getting a set of new textbooks for free, he was too surprised to speak. Are you sure, ma'am? He asked softly. She nodded. You deserve it, Arjun. You work hard every day. This is just a little help to make things easier. He thanked her quietly and carried the books home that evening, holding them like they were made of gold. His father was already home, sitting outside with a cup of tea. When he saw the new books, his face lit up with pride. Look at you, his father said, his tired smile wide. You've got better books than I ever had. Arjun laughed a little. You'll have to help me keep them safe, Baba. They're special. His father nodded. Everything you touch is special to me. That night, Arjun studied late into the evening. The lamp flickered. The room was small, but his mind was full of quiet determination. He wanted to make every word he read worth his father's pain, every page worth his hard work. The following morning, during assembly, the headmaster made an announcement. Today, he said into the microphone, we want to recognize a student whose words reminded us what real dreams are. He may not have spoken loudly, but he spoke truly. The students began whispering softly. Arjun stood still, confused. Then the headmaster called his name. Arjun, please come forward. The courtyard went silent again. Arjun hesitated, his palms sweating. The teacher gave him a small nod of encouragement. Slowly he walked to the front, the eyes of hundreds of students following him. The headmaster placed a small badge on his shirt, a simple round badge that read, Model Student. It wasn't made of gold or silver, but it felt like the most valuable thing in the world. The headmaster spoke again. Arjun reminded us that dreams don't always shout. Sometimes they whisper from a kind heart, and that whisper can be louder than anything else. The crowd began to clap, softly at first, then louder. Arjun's classmates smiled and cheered for him. He didn't know where to look or what to do, so he just bowed his head slightly. When he returned to his seat, the boy who used to tease him patted his shoulder. "You're amazing, Arjun," he said quietly. Arjun smiled, embarrassed but happy. That day, he realized something new, that silence could carry strength, that honesty could move people even more than loud words. After school, as he walked home, he saw his father again on the same road, waiting near his cart. His father looked tired but smiled when he saw the badge pinned on Arjun's chest. "What's this?" he asked. Arjun shrugged. "Just something from school." His father touched the badge gently and said, "I don't need to read it. I already know what it means." They walked home side by side, their shadows stretching long on the dusty road. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and gold. The world around them was still noisy, people shouting in the market, children playing nearby. But between them, there was that same peaceful silence that said more than words ever could. That night, after dinner, Arjun's mother took the badge and pinned it near their small mirror. "This should stay where we can see it every day," she said proudly. Arjun smiled. "It's just a small badge, Ma." She looked at him and replied, "Maybe, but it came from something big, your heart." As the night deepened, Arjun lay awake again, listening to the soft breathing of his parents. The wind moved through the broken window, carrying the faint sound of crickets. He thought about everything that had happened, the silence, the teacher's kindness, his classmates' change, and the way his father's eyes had shone with pride. He realized that even though they were poor, they were rich in something far more important: love, hope, and the strength to keep going. And in that moment, as sleep began to pull him under, Arjun whispered to himself, "Someday, I'll give them everything they ever wished for." Days turned into weeks, and the memory of that special day stayed alive in everyone's heart. The teacher often looked at Arjun during class and felt a quiet sense of pride. He hadn't just spoken words, he had changed something in the air of that small school. Even the students who used to laugh carelessly now seemed softer, kinder in their own ways. Arjun didn't think much about being special. He still woke up before dawn, helped his mother fetch water, and walked the long road to school every day. But people began to see him differently. The shopkeeper near the bus stop would smile and say, "Our little scholar is here." The younger children would wave as he passed. He didn't know it, but his story had already started to spread beyond the classroom walls. One afternoon during lunch, a teacher from another class came in to meet him. She said, "So you're Arjun, the boy who made everyone quiet that day?" He blushed and looked down. She smiled. That silence was a good kind of silence, you know. It made people think. Arjun just nodded politely, not sure what to say. For him, it wasn't about attention. It was about truth. Life at home continued to be hard, but a few things had changed. Some teachers had quietly started sending extra notebooks, pencils, and even small bags of rice for his family. His father didn't ask where they came from. He simply accepted them with a thankful smile. One evening, as they sat outside their small home, his father said, "You know, people talk about you now. Someone told me at the market that my son made the whole school silent. What did you say to them?" Arjun smiled shyly. "Nothing special, Baba. Just something I felt." His father laughed softly. Whatever it was, it must have been powerful. People don't fall quiet easily. Arjun didn't answer, but his heart filled with warmth. He looked at his father's hands, rough, calloused, and cracked from years of pulling heavy carts. Those hands told the story of their life better than any words could. A few weeks later, the teacher announced that there would be a community event at the school, a gathering where parents and students could share stories and performances. She asked each class to present something. Arjun's class was told to prepare a short play. When the teacher asked for volunteers, many students were excited. They began discussing ideas, funny ones, adventurous ones, until the teacher said, "What if we make something real? Something about life and love?" Everyone turned to Arjun almost at the same time. Someone whispered, Maybe Arjun should help write it. He was startled. Me? He asked. The teacher smiled. Yes, you. I think you have something to say that people need to hear. At first he hesitated, unsure if he could do it. But slowly he agreed. Together with a few classmates, he wrote a small play about a boy who works hard to help his father rest. It wasn't exactly his story, but it felt close enough that every line came from his heart. On the day of the event, the small school courtyard filled with parents, neighbors, and local people. The students performed songs, dances, and jokes, and the air was full of laughter. Then came Arjun's class. When their play began, the laughter faded into quiet. The play showed a boy who watched his father work every day, too tired to smile. The boy studied hard, promising to one day give him rest. The ending was simple, the father finally sitting down, smiling proudly at his grown-up son. When the play ended, there was silence again. The same kind of silence Arjun had created before, heavy, emotional, and real. Then applause filled the air. Parents wiped their eyes. The teacher had tears on her face. Arjun stood at the edge of the stage, nervous and overwhelmed. But when he looked into the crowd, he saw his father there sitting in the back, clapping with both hands, his face shining with pride. After the event, his father hugged him tightly, something he rarely did in public. "You made me proud again," he whispered, "more than I can ever say." That night, the three of them sat together outside their house under the stars. The air was cool and the sound of crickets surrounded them. His mother said, "I saw how people looked at you today. You spoke to their hearts." Arjun smiled softly. "I didn't mean to. That's what makes it powerful," she said. "You just told the truth. People can feel the truth." His father looked at him for a long moment before saying quietly, "You've already started changing our life, son. Not with money, but with your heart." Arjun didn't know how to reply. He just sat between his parents, watching the stars above them, feeling something deep. Not pride, not excitement, just peace. In the following days, something else changed too. The headmaster shared the story of Arjun's words and the school's play with the local newspaper. A small article was printed about him. Just a few lines, but it meant the world to his family. When Arjun saw the newspaper, he couldn't believe it. His name was there, printed in black ink. His father took the paper carefully as if it were a treasure and showed it to every neighbor. "This is my son," he said proudly. "He's teaching people what real dreams look like." From that day on, people in their small town greeted Arjun with smiles. Some even called him the boy who made silence speak. He didn't understand what that meant fully, but it made him happy to know that something good had come from his simple words. And yet he never changed who he was. He still walked to school the same way, still sat in the same seat, still studied quietly. Fame, even small, didn't touch his heart. What stayed with him was that moment of silence and the one that told him the world had listened. At night, as he lay beside his parents, he would sometimes think about how far his words had traveled. He hadn't meant to teach anyone anything. He just wanted his father to rest. But somehow that wish had taught others what love really meant. He smiled to himself in the dark, listening to his father's steady breathing beside him. In that sound, he found peace, the same peace that had started it all. Years passed, and the small boy who once spoke softly in a noisy classroom grew into a young man. Arjun finished school with good marks, though every year had been a struggle. His father's work never became easier, and money was still tight. But something else had grown in their home: hope. His teachers never forgot him. They helped him apply for scholarships, filling out forms that his parents couldn't understand. He studied harder than ever, often reading by the dim light of an old lantern, the pages of his books turning soft from use. His dream stayed the same: to make his father rest. One morning, as the sun rose over their village, Arjun left home to attend a nearby college. His mother packed his small bag with food, and his father gave him a worn-out pen, saying, "This was the one I used to write my first name in school. I never got to study much. Maybe it will bring you luck." Arjun took it with both hands, holding back tears. "I'll make you proud, Baba," he said. The next few years were not easy. There were days when he went hungry, nights when he wanted to give up. But every time he felt weak, he remembered his father's bent back, his mother's quiet strength, and the silence that had once fallen after his words in that classroom. It kept him going. He studied in libraries, tutored younger students for small amounts of money, and sometimes skipped meals to buy books. Slowly, his effort began to show. Teachers noticed him again, just like before, and helped him whenever they could. After finishing college, Arjun became a teacher at a local school, the same one where his journey had begun. The old building had been repainted, the cracked walls repaired, but it still smelled of chalk dust and childhood dreams. On his first day, he walked into the classroom and stood near the same window where he used to sit as a boy. The sunlight touched the wooden desks, and for a moment he could almost hear the echoes of laughter and the bell that once rang through his own childhood. The students stared at him curiously. He smiled and said, "Good morning, everyone." They greeted him back loudly, filling the room with energy. He looked at them and said, "Before we start our lesson, I want to ask you something. What is your dream?" Hands shot up instantly. The answers came one after another: doctor, pilot, engineer, singer. Arjun smiled at their excitement. When they finished, he paused and said gently, "Those are all beautiful dreams. But don't forget to dream for the people who love you too. Sometimes the biggest dream is to make someone else's life easier." The class went quiet, just like it had all those years ago. The silence was soft, thoughtful. And in that silence, Arjun saw himself, the boy he used to be, sitting in the last row, afraid to speak. After class, he walked outside and found a group of children playing near the old tree. The sight made him smile. His heart felt full, not of pride but of gratitude. Life had come full circle. That evening, he went home to visit his parents. His father, now older and slower, was sitting on a chair outside, resting. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted his cup of tea. When he saw Arjun, his face brightened instantly. "You came," his father said. "I was just thinking about you." Arjun sat beside him. "How are you feeling, Baba?" His father smiled. "Better. These days I rest more than I work." "Can you believe that?" "I finally get to rest." Arjun looked at him, his eyes warm with emotion. "That was my dream, remember?" His father chuckled softly. "Yes, I remember. You kept your word." They sat together, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. His mother joined them, placing a plate of roasted peanuts between them. The three of them didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The silence was enough. Arjun looked at his father's relaxed face and felt a deep sense of peace. The years of struggle, the sleepless nights, the hunger, the studying, it had all led to this quiet evening where his father could finally breathe without pain. Later that night, when the stars filled the sky, Arjun stepped outside and looked up. The wind was cool and the world felt calm. He thought about everything: that classroom, the teacher who believed in him, the classmates who had changed, and the silence that had taught them all what love could sound like. He realized that sometimes the smallest moment can change an entire life. A few honest words spoken from the heart can echo for years. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you," not to anyone in particular, but to life itself. And somewhere in that quiet night, it felt as if the world whispered back, reminding him that silence, when born from truth, can speak louder than anything else. The boy who once made a room fall silent had grown into a man who understood its meaning. That silence is not emptiness, but peace. And that peace, once found, stays forever. Years later, the small village had changed. The dusty road that once led to the old school was now lined with shops and small houses with painted walls. The banyan tree near the gate had grown thicker, its roots wrapping around the earth like an old guardian of memories. Children still ran through the same courtyard, their laughter filling the air. But the world around them had grown just a little brighter. Arjun walked slowly through that gate one morning, his steps steady and calm. His hair had a few strands of gray now, and the lines on his face told stories of years filled with work, patience, and kindness. He wasn't just a teacher anymore. He was now the headmaster of the school that had once shaped his life. Every morning, he stood near the flagpole, greeting students as they came in. Some ran up to him with excitement. Others smiled shyly, the way he once did when his own teacher spoke kindly to him. He saw himself in them, their hope, their fears, their quiet dreams. Inside his office, near the window, there was a small wooden shelf with only a few things on it. A framed picture of his parents, the old pen his father had given him, a faded newspaper clipping from years ago, and the small badge that once read, Model Student. Each item carried a story, a reminder of how far he had come and what love and honesty could build over time. That day was special. The school was celebrating its annual day, something Arjun always looked forward to. Parents would come, children would perform, and the air would be full of pride and laughter. As he walked through the classrooms, he stopped for a moment near the one where it had all begun. The same corner seat, the same soft light through the window. He could almost see his younger self sitting there, nervous but determined. He smiled quietly and whispered, "Thank you," as if speaking to the past. During the event, after the songs and dances, one of the teachers announced that a few students would be giving short speeches about their dreams. The stage was decorated with flowers and colorful cloth. The sound of the microphone crackled as a small boy stepped up nervously, holding a crumpled paper. Arjun watched from his seat in the front row. The boy's voice was shaky at first, but soon it grew clearer. "My father drives a rickshaw," he said. "He works very hard every day. My dream is to study well and make sure he never has to work when he gets old." The crowd went quiet. Arjun froze for a second. It was as if time had folded back on itself. The words were different, but the feeling was the same. Simple, pure, and full of love. The silence that followed felt familiar, almost sacred. Arjun smiled softly, his eyes glistening. When the applause began, he joined in, clapping longer than anyone else. After the event ended, the boy came running up to him. "Sir, did I speak okay?" he asked shyly. Arjun placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and said, "You spoke perfectly. Never forget those words. They're more powerful than you know." The boy grinned and ran off to his parents, and Arjun stood there for a long time watching. He realized that the same truth he had once spoken had now passed into another voice, another heart. Life had come full circle again. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, Arjun stayed back in his office. The school grounds were quiet. The sound of crickets filled the night air. He sat by the window looking at the moonlight falling on the empty desks. His thoughts drifted to his parents. His father had passed away peacefully a few years earlier. It had been a quiet morning, the kind he had always wished for. No pain, no struggle, just rest. Arjun had sat beside him, holding his hand, whispering, "You can rest now. Baba, you did enough." His mother had followed a year later, her last words being, "You kept your promise." He missed them deeply, but it wasn't the kind of sadness that hurt. It was gentle, like a soft ache that reminded him of love that never left. He took the old pen from the shelf and turned it in his fingers. It no longer worked, but he kept it close as a symbol of everything that had guided him. Hard work, honesty, and love. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed faintly. Arjun thought about how different his life could have been if he had never spoken that day in class. If he had kept silent, maybe no one would have ever known his story. Maybe he himself would have forgotten his dream. But one moment of courage, one truth spoken from the heart, had changed not just his life, but many others too. That silence after his words had never really ended. It had just kept spreading quietly, touching people he would never even meet. He stood up and walked to the doorway. The moonlight lit the empty playground. He imagined all the children who would grow up here, some loud, some shy, some dreaming of big cities, others dreaming of peace at home. He hoped they would all learn what he once learned, that even small voices can carry great meaning, and even quiet dreams can change lives. Before leaving, he locked his office and turned off the light. He walked home along the same road he had taken as a child, the one lined with the smell of dust and trees. Every step felt familiar, every shadow held a memory. When he reached home, he lit a small lamp near his parents' picture. The flame flickered gently, lighting up their smiling faces. He sat down beside it and closed his eyes. In that quiet moment, he didn't think about success, money, or recognition. He thought about love, the kind that gives without asking, that works without rest, that speaks softly but never fades. He whispered, "I did it. Baba, you can rest." The lamp's flame danced in reply, as if the world itself was listening. Outside, the village was still awake, voices calling, children laughing, dogs barking in the distance. Life went on, full of sound. But inside that small house there was peace. The same peace that had begun many years ago with one boy's simple wish. Silence, once born from pain and love, had grown into strength and hope. It lived on, in classrooms, in stories, in hearts that still believed that small words could hold big meanings. And as Arjun drifted to sleep that night, the moonlight fell softly across his face, the same way it had when he was a child. The world outside was noisy, but within him there was calm. A calm that would last as quiet and eternal as love itself. Years continued to pass, and time, as it always does, carried life gently forward. Arjun had grown older now. His hair had turned mostly gray, his hands slower, but his eyes still carried the same quiet kindness that had once silenced a classroom full of noise. The village around him had changed beyond what anyone could have imagined. There was now a paved road leading to the school, a small library built beside it, and even a computer room that the children used with wide-eyed curiosity. The world outside had moved forward, but inside the school gates something deeper had stayed the same. The spirit of honesty, simplicity, and love that Arjun had planted years ago. Every morning he still arrived early, carrying his small notebook and an old thermos of tea. The teachers would greet him with warm smiles, and the children would wave as he passed. For many of them, he wasn't just a headmaster, he was a symbol of hope. The man who had once been a student like them, from a poor home with nothing but determination and love to guide him. That year, the school was chosen for a district award, the most inspiring educational institution. Officials from the city were coming to visit, and everyone was busy preparing. The walls were repainted, the gardens trimmed, and the students rehearsed songs and poems. Arjun didn't think much about the award. He just wanted the children to feel proud of where they studied. But on the day of the visit, something unexpected happened. As the guests took their seats, one of the teachers announced that a few students would perform a short play. Arjun didn't know what they had prepared. It was meant to be a surprise. The curtains opened, and the stage filled with children dressed in simple clothes. The story began with a boy sitting beside his tired father. The boy said softly, "One day I'll work hard and give you rest." Arjun froze in his chair. He knew those words. Every line, every expression, was his story. The one he had lived, the one that had started everything. The play continued, showing the boy studying by candlelight, growing up, becoming a teacher, and finally helping others dream too. When the play ended, the hall fell into silence, just as it had all those years ago. Then came the sound of clapping, loud, endless, heartfelt. Arjun stood up slowly. His throat felt tight, his eyes wet. He couldn't speak for a moment. When he finally did, his voice was soft. "Thank you," he said simply. "You've given me the greatest gift. My story through your eyes." The official from the city came forward and said, "Sir, we've heard many stories of success. But this is a story of the heart. You've not just built a school, you've built a generation of good people." After the event, as everyone celebrated, a young reporter came up to him. "Sir," she said, holding out a recorder, "can I ask what made you start teaching?" Arjun smiled faintly. "A silence," he said. "There was a moment in my life when words stopped and the world listened. I just kept living in that silence, turning it into something good." The reporter looked puzzled for a moment, but she smiled anyway. "That's beautiful," she said. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, Arjun sat alone in the empty hall. The stage lights were off, but moonlight slipped through the windows, falling on the floorboards. He could still hear echoes of the children's laughter, the clapping, the sound of their voices saying lines that once belonged to his past. He sat there for a long while, feeling both full and light, full of memories, light in his heart. When he finally left the hall, he walked slowly through the playground. The night was cool, and the stars above seemed unusually bright. As he passed the old banyan tree, he paused. Its roots were thicker now, its branches wider. Beneath it was a wooden bench, the same one he had often sat on as a boy, dreaming of rest for his father. He sat down for a moment, closing his eyes. In the stillness, he could almost hear the faint sounds of the past, his teacher's voice, his classmates' laughter, his father's tired sigh. They all blended into one soft memory that wrapped around him like a warm blanket. A gentle wind blew, carrying the scent of jasmine from somewhere nearby. Arjun opened his eyes and whispered, "It all began here." The next morning, when the sun rose over the village, the children found him sitting on the same bench, his face peaceful, his eyes closed, the faintest smile on his lips. The old pen his father had given him lay gently in his hand. The news spread quickly, and the entire village gathered that evening to light candles near the school gate. The students, teachers, and parents stood together, some in tears, some smiling softly through them. They didn't mourn him with sadness, they remembered him with gratitude. The next day, the headmaster's room was turned into a small memorial, not grand, just simple. On the wall hung his photograph, his father's pen framed beside it, and below it, a small plaque that read, "He taught us that love speaks loudest in silence." Years later, people would still tell his story, not as a legend, not as a fairy tale, but as something real, something that had grown from their own soil. Children who never met him would read about him in their school books and feel inspired. Teachers would mention his name when students lost hope. Parents would remind their children, "Work hard like Arjun did, not for yourself, but for the people you love." And in that small village, under the shade of the old banyan tree, where silence had once fallen after a boy's simple words, peace continued to live, carried by every voice that dared to speak truth from the heart. The story had ended long ago, but its echo would never fade, because sometimes a single moment, a few honest words, can plant a silence that grows into a lifetime of love. Years passed, and Arjun's story slowly became part of the village's soul. The school children still spoke his name with affection, their voices soft as if speaking of someone who still watched over them. His photograph hung in every classroom, not out of duty, but out of love. Teachers would tell new students, "He sat where you sit. He dreamed the same way you do." One morning, many years after his passing, a young woman arrived at the school gates. She looked to be in her mid-20s, wearing a simple salwar suit and holding a small folder in her hand. Her eyes searched the buildings with quiet excitement and nervousness. The guard asked, "Can I help you?" She smiled gently. "Yes. I'm here to apply for a teaching position." Her name was Mira. She had grown up in a nearby town, but her mother had once studied in this very school, in Arjun's last batch as headmaster. Mira's mother used to tell her bedtime stories about him, not fairy tales or kings, but about a simple man who changed lives with his kindness. She walked slowly through the corridor, stopping by the old banyan tree. There, under the shade, was the wooden bench. Time had worn it down, but it still stood strong. A small plaque below it read, "Where silence spoke." Mira sat there for a moment. The wind brushed her face, carrying the scent of chalk and old books. She imagined him sitting there, tired, thoughtful, yet peaceful. Later she met the current headmaster, an older man who had once been a young teacher under Arjun's guidance. He smiled warmly when she handed in her papers. "So, you want to teach here?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly. "It feels like this place calls me." He nodded. "It calls many who still believe in what he taught, that a good heart can change the world quietly." She was hired soon after. On her first day in class, Mira stood before a group of curious students. Their chatter filled the room until she raised her hand. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to tell you a story." The room fell still. Even the smallest children leaned forward. She began. "A long time ago, there was a boy who lived not far from here. He didn't have much. His father worked hard every day and his family struggled. But one day, that boy said something so simple, so honest that his whole school went silent. The students listened closely. Some had heard bits of the story before, but hearing it from her, with her calm voice and gentle eyes, made it feel alive again. She continued, He said he wanted to study so that his father could rest. That's all. Just that. But those words changed everything, because they came from love. The children sat quiet, thoughtful. Mira smiled and said, "That boy grew up and became a teacher. He taught here, in this very room. He believed every dream matters, especially the ones born from kindness. His name was Arjun." A few of the children gasped softly, looking at his photo on the wall. One little boy whispered, "So this is where he taught?" "Yes," she said, "and you sit where his students once sat." After class, she stepped outside, her heart full. The air around her felt warm, as if the past and present had quietly shaken hands. She walked again to the banyan tree, where she found an older man sitting on the bench, the former headmaster. He smiled at her and said, "He would have liked you. You teach from the heart." She blushed slightly. "I don't know if I could ever be like him." He shook his head. "That's the thing. He never wanted anyone to be like him. He wanted everyone to be their best selves. That's how his silence still speaks." Years went by. Mira became one of the most beloved teachers in the school. She taught her students not just reading and writing, but the value of gratitude, patience, and love. Every year on Founders Day, she would take her students to the banyan tree and tell them the story again.